Hello everybody, this is Eckhart. I welcome you to a new video presentation this evening on my YouTube channel. The first thing I want to do is share with you the last outfit that I bought during my recent trip to Portland, Oregon. This is a really cute romper that I bought at a wonderful little store called You, which is almost like a New York style boutique, but it is located in Portland, slightly south of the Pearl District. I think it's on Washington Street. So this is a really funky little store. I really liked the selection in there. They had wonderful, very stylish clothes, sort of a new wave bent, but skirts, tops, they had all sizes. I really liked that store very much. And so I had to resist buying more things there because there were so many wonderful clothes there that I really liked a lot and would have certainly enjoyed wearing. But anyway, I really like this romper. It makes me feel very sexy. And tonight, what I want to do is combine sexy with intellect, because I would like to respond to a video that I recently saw, actually today, earlier on YouTube. This is a video, an excerpt from sort of a lecture that was given by Camille Paglia, who's a very provocative public intellectual. And so she was addressing the whole transsexual, transgender phenomenon and was expressing some rather skeptical thoughts about it. So I want to respond to that, but I also want to be fair. So what I'm going to do is look at three major points that she made and respond to those. I will give a secret away, and that is that when I went to college, I majored in philosophy, and then I went on to graduate school, and I got a PhD in philosophy, and so philosophical issues are very important to me. I don't want to bore you, but I do think they're important, especially when they impinge upon our community. So I want to address some of the things that Camille Paglia said. So let me begin with, there are basically 3 points, and I'll try to be brief. The first point that she made is one that I actually agree with, and that is that it probably isn't a good idea for a young person to undergo sexual reassignment surgery and become the gender that the person wants to be, opposite of the gender that the person was born. It probably isn't a good idea to do that when somebody is too young. So when we're talking about somebody who is 8 or 9 or 10 years old before hitting puberty, that's probably not a good idea. And so Camille Paglia put it by saying, well, maybe somebody shouldn't really consider this until he or she has reached the age of majority. That's like 18 or 19 or something like that, when you're old enough to make a prudent judgment about whether this is the right thing for you to do. Now, I basically agree with that. I think that that's a very serious decision. It's irreversible or very difficult to reverse if somebody decides to undergo that kind of reconstructive surgery. So I agree with that. But what concerned me was that later in her presentation, Camille Paglia then was criticizing people at Brown University. So evidently at Brown University in the United States, in Rhode Island here in the United States, the official school policy is to provide, through the health care plan provided to students, part of that plan will cover sexual reassignment surgery. And so Camille Paglia was very skeptical about this and dismissive of it. And it occurred to me that there was a disconnect here, because let's face it, when somebody has when somebody's in college, when somebody goes to school, that person is at least 18 years old on average, and so, or maybe even older. And so here we're talking about undergraduates or graduate students who have reached the age of majority. And Paglia was saying, well, I still have a lot of problems with that, which basically contradicted her earlier point, which is that, well, we really should be concerned about people who have not reached that age yet undergoing this surgery. But now all of a sudden she was extending that to cast doubt upon people who have reached the age of majority undergoing it. So I really thought that that was quite problematic. So that's one point I wanted to make. And I'm consulting my notes because I want to make sure that I cover everything. So then another criticism that Paglia makes in this video, and by the way, I have not referenced this or provided a link. Those of you who are interested in seeing the original video can just type in Camille Paglia transsexual or transgender on YouTube and it will come up. So I'm not going to bother to post that link because all of you are clever enough to find it for yourselves, I'm sure, if you're interested in looking at it. So the second point that Camille Paglia made was that one of the things that concerned her about the whole transgender, transsexual phenomenon, or people beginning to deal with this in a much more public way, is that it seemed to be a threat to maleness, as it has been traditionally understood, or just maleness implicit. Or the idea is that, well, when people begin to change their gender, or at least instead of accepting the gender that's in conformity with their biological sex, they feel drawn to the opposite gender. Somehow this whole phenomenon represents a serious threat to maleness. Now I have to admit that I found that assertion totally implausible, and she certainly did not provide any justification for it. But let me explain to you why I found it and continue to find it implausible. There are many people, trans people, who are transitioning not just from biological male to gender female, but there are also trans men who are transitioning from biological female, that is, they were born with female sex, but then they are transitioning to the male gender. So the idea that people who are transitioning from biologically female to maleness, which is the gender that they associate with, obviously that doesn't represent a threat to maleness. If anything, that would represent support for that or a reaffirmation of it. So I think that when we look at the entire phenomenon of people who are transitioning, the idea that that somehow represents a threat to maleness doesn't really make a lot of sense, and certainly Paglia in her remarks did not justify that assertion. So that's the second point I wanted to make. And then finally, there was this kind of thing that you often hear a lot of times coming from people along the right side of the aisle, as it were, and that is, well, we're sort of entering into this is a sign that our civilization is decaying. It's almost like the way Rome was towards the end of its heyday. The empire is about to collapse. The barbarians are around, right on the fringe and ready to move in and topple this empire that is teetering because all these people are engaged in hedonism. And, Paglia even said at one point, well, these earlier images of maleness where they were very virile and strong, now men are becoming more effeminate, and so this is a harbinger or a sign, at least, of imminent collapse. Now, I have to respond to this in light of some things that I've read by Nietzsche recently, and just to encapsulate it, to summarize, my feeling about that is, following Nietzsche, is, why is that? What does that show exactly? In other words, if a society cannot cope with the fact that people who were born with a particular biological sex feel drawn to the opposite gender and want to identify that way, to the point that they undergo the transition, they are actually happy, they are actually productive members of society, and they are making a positive contribution to their friends, their families, and their surrounding, as I said, society. If a particular culture cannot assimilate that and cannot absorb that, then there's something wrong with the culture already. In other words, it's not clear to me, and again, certainly Paglia has not shown, that the problem here lies in the transgender or the transsexual phenomenon itself, the transitioning phenomenon. Why isn't it the case instead that if the culture is too weak and already teetering on the edge of collapse because it can't accommodate people who are just trying to be who they are or how they feel they are without hurting anybody else, well, shouldn't a society like that fail? To put it somewhat provocatively, maybe that society should collapse if it can't accommodate people who are simply trying to live happily and be true to themselves. That, to me, seems to cast more doubt upon the society itself, independently of any questions about transgenderism or transsexuality or cross-dressing, or men who want to dress as women, or women who want to dress as men, or any of the rest of that. And so, my overall impression here with Paglia's video lecture was that it was kind of like a piece of Swiss cheese. You know, it had a lot of holes in it, and by the time you add up all the holes, in this case, there really wasn't a lot of substance, which was a little bit disappointing to me because here's someone who is presenting herself as a public intellectual, and I would have expected a better job, a more concerted effort, not just to make provocative and controversial assertions, but to back them up with reasoned arguments. And I didn't really see that because I don't really see in that presentation any answers to the questions or the objections that I just raised. So in any event, I'm sorry that I went on at length about that, but you have to pardon Katya because she is a philosopher and she feels really driven or compelled to address this. So the last thing I wanted to do tonight is just read for you in German a beautiful passage from Friedrich Nietzsche's book, Also sprach Zarathustra. This is a wonderful passage, and I've been reading this work recently. I don't agree with a lot of things that Nietzsche says, but I do think that he can give us some insights. And so what I'd like to do is just read this passage for you in German so that you can hear just how beautiful it sounds, and then I'll try to translate it into English. So he says at one point, Sagt mir doch, wie kann Gold zum höchsten Werte? Darum, dass es ungemein ist und unnützlich und leuchtend und mild im Glanze, es schenkt sich immer. And so he says something, well, please tell me, how does gold come to have the highest worth? Because of this, because it is uncommon and not useful, and it's glowing and very gentle in its reflection, it always gives itself. Then he goes on to say, nur als Abbild der höchsten Tugend kann Gold zum höchsten Werte. Goldgleich leuchtet der Blick dem Schenkenden. Goldesglanz schließt Friede zwischen Mond und Sonne. So here it means, only as an image of the highest virtue did gold come to its highest worth. Like gold glows the reflection or the glance of the gift giver. A golden shining brings peace between the moon and the sun. And so this is a very beautiful passage. I think that it's important to read people like Nietzsche because even if we don't agree with them, they can give us very interesting ideas, and some of those ideas may help us to respond to people like Paglia, who are saying things that really don't make a lot of sense. So anyway, I'm sorry that I went on at length a bit there, but I thought it was important. So let me conclude tonight by just modeling one more time this very, very nice, this very cute romper that I have. And I hope that those of you who have not been to Portland, Oregon, will go someday and see it. It's a really wonderful city. There's so many wonderful restaurants and museums and art galleries and very progressive and tolerant culture there. It's a very multicultural city that I think many of you who are in the cross-dressing or transsexual or transgender community or gender fluid, whatever you want to call it, many of you, I think, will find, if you haven't been there before, I think you will find it a really pleasant experience and a place that it's very rewarding to visit. So, thank you again for your attention, or in German, your Aufmerksamkeit. And this is Katja. Thank you for joining me again, and thank you for being so patient with me. I know I went on a little bit at length there, but I thought I needed to say something in response to Paglia. So until next time, I wish everybody a very good and peaceful night. Bye-bye.